Hello everyone and welcome back. So we've got some news today, quite early into the day. Patch 6.2's devlog, which is going to go into some information regarding magic items, general balancing because the item system is getting slightly updated, and there's also some talk regarding the two brand new units. So we do have to talk about a lot of stuff. I've gone through the blog very quickly just to see how much content there is in here because oh lord, there is a lot of typing. So let's just jump right in. We have to talk about a bunch of stuff. So let's get started. Greetings. Alongside the item balancing changes that we have on the horizon, the magic item rework that I'll be talking about today is a pretty comprehensive effort from all of us on the team to unify our design approaches to generic magic items across the entire game. It's helped us to build a consistent framework that ensures that the items you get meet the expectations you have for its rarity. If it looks cool, it should feel cool when you use it in your loadouts. Well, I mean, the items don't have any visual changes, but okay. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree for this, so let's continue. But why now? Well, since the release of our first entry to the series, magic items have generally been added in line with each major release. Warhammer 1, 2, 3. With some further additions made alongside the releases of new races, Bretonnia, Chaos Dwarfs, Tomb Kings, etc., which as many of you have no doubt experienced. We haven't then taken on enough of a duty of care to keep them updated. Additionally, while each iteration was always made with the very best of intentions, none of these iterations ever shared a balancing framework. Over the years, this has understandably caused a significant disparity between items in a variety of locales. Okay, so just unifying everything. That's great, actually. This is going to hopefully be quite good for the game. So let's continue here. We've had a particular problem with items appearing as one rarity, but being significantly stronger or weaker than the rarity they were given. 10% spell resistance for a rare item, what a bargain. So we got to work on setting things in a more consistent order. So what have we done? Well, at the heart of our solution is a cost-budget matrix. Under the hood, items have always had what's called a uniqueness score, which helps to determine what rarity the item should appear in and how commonly that item should drop. For example, an item that had between 0 and 29 uniqueness would appear as a common item. Okay, so there is like a few different strings in the back, just kind of seeing what drops or not. That's pretty cool. I mean, we always knew that it was there, but it's always kind of interesting when they actually explain this type of stuff, right? So as a part of this work, we've weaponized that score to also derive our closest approximation of the true value of an item, treating it as a budget to spend on cost matrix, point for point on its effects. For example, we might take an item with a budget of 45 uniqueness points, a decent common in our new ranges, and dole it out as follows. 15 fire resistance at 1.2 points apiece equals 18, 8 bonus versus large at 3.5 points apiece, which is 28, total value to 46. Yeah, curious. I am kind of curious to see how they get to these values, right? Maybe they're using like the tabletop method that Games Workshop use, and even then that makes no sense sometimes. This is a very simple item with no modifiers or more complex stats, but showcases the general idea that items have a consummate power budget that is equated with how rare they are. Additionally, we have a variety of modifiers that take effect to apply these calculations, such as strong synergies applied at all units in force of excessive stocking of a single unit stat, which further affect the final score of an item. It's very much our intent that this new system gives us a platform to effectively and more regularly iterate on our existing colossal backlog of items, as well as ensure that we have the right tools at hand to balance new magic items that we come to add in the future too. Okay, so the idea here is just to, it's literally just parity between all three games. This is great. This is actually really good. Some of the items have actually turned into absolute garbage. There's a lot of items that you just don't really use at all. Let's continue here. When designing revisions of this nature, we've always looked to set goals that help us to measure the effect of our changes. When you get your hands on the update itself next week, we'd very much like to hear from you on how you feel we've met these standards. Okay, so yeah, next week it'll be Tuesday, I guess, the usual style. I don't know if I actually said it in the intro, but mostly, yeah, you know, It's not that far away. It does seem like this is going to be the big thing in 6.2, so I guess they were focusing on just fixing some issues that they knew were creeping up. Alright, so this is what they want from the blog. Provide strong guidelines for general item design with a little bit of wiggle room for special cases. While this aims to standardize our approach, it does not establish it as an iron rule that can't be broken. If an item ends up 10 to 15% outside the bounds of our rules, we're okay with it as long as it enhances your campaigns. Okay, so you can actually get stronger items just as an RNG aspect, which is okay. Populate the item pool with all new effects. Plenty of effects have never been used in items before, such as generic sources of barrier or battle healing camp. Expanding the effect pool lets us reduce the overlap of common choices and pushes the identity of each item even further. That I actually do quite like, the idea of just getting more effects in there. Some barrier, healing, maybe even just like regen with some items would be lovely too. For units rather than actual just character items would be lovely. Let's continue. Make item rarity translate with item power level. Item rarity derives how commonly an item should appear as part of random generation. Ideally, this means that the items you see more rarely should generally be much more interesting, or at least a lot more powerful. Yes, a bunch of them right now are pretty awful. So yeah, no, this is good. This is good. It's basically just like the MMO approach, right? Well, there's a different color system here, but you know, green being better than white, and then blue being stronger, and so on. That works. That really does work. If they're going to be much more noticeable, it's definitely going to be better for people. I wonder if they're going to go around the items for certain characters too, because some of the characters have really awful item effects. Let's continue. Reduce UX overload of item management by raising impact and lowering frequency of interaction. We receive regular reports from players who find that the management of excessive items frustrating, yes, that's true, or boring. We're aiming to reduce the number of decisions being made, but make each of the decisions that you do a bit more notable. Great, yeah, so this does mean that we're going to get a lot of effects coming in for these items. This actually does sound quite good. I know it's a lot of admin stuff here being talked about, but overall this should be better in the game. So let's continue. It's a lot of pen and paper work, a lot of which we know doesn't always look flashy and out of the gate, but based on our own playtesting and the feedback we've received so far, we know that this is a massive positive step forward in this area of the game. Fair enough. The eagle-eyed among you may have spied that we look to rework magic items much earlier than next week's update, but when we playtested many of the changes that we originally had in mind, we realized that the scope we had was way bigger than we initially thought, and our initial feedback caused us to hold back on deploying an earlier version of these changes until we could solve for the best version possible of this rework. So yeah, they're basically confirming that this was a lot of work and we're not going to really expect that many big changes in 6.2, and that's perfectly fine as long as, you know, it's noticeable. Again, people might not notice it too well, but if you're used to like the tabletop, it's kind of like when a FAQ drops, right? It sounds interesting, sometimes it just is a bunch of numbers, but once you jump into it and you play with your army, you play your regular campaigns, you'll start to notice the changes. Let's continue. Our original scope wasn't big enough. Originally, we had a short list of around 80 items that we knew needed a good patch to bring them up to our new standard, with the intent of making further iterations over several patches. That alone never felt quite right. So we went back into the kitchen and ensured that our rebalance didn't just apply to 10% of our items, but over the over 800 common, uncommon, and some rare items that we have in game today. So they're basically doing as many of the items as possible. That's great. We also knew that we didn't originally have sufficient gaps in the min-max ranges of power when evaluating items based on their rarity. Items that were valued at 29 uniqueness, our highest value for a common item, and 30 uniqueness, our lowest value for an uncommon item, were pretty much indistinguishable. It made the common feel really powerful relative to its tier, and the other feeling super weak when compared to the other items in the tier. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, this kind of works, I think, the way I see this uniqueness number and so on, in a very similar way to how World of Warcraft does item level. So you can have an epic and you can have a rare, and if the rare has better item level, it's just going to be better overall than the epic. Let's continue. We don't like that either, so to fix that, we rebalance the distribution of item uniqueness so that all rarity tiers now sit much higher up on the scale overall, but with a tighter focus on their range as well as higher minimum power levels. For example, a common item used between 0 and 29 will now be found between 35 and 50. Again, the items don't really say that much for me. I'm seeing it as a WoW translation. It kind of makes sense to me. Let's continue with the last bit here. We've also introduced air gaps between our rarity tiers. Common items no longer end at 29 and uncommons no longer start at 30. Okay, when the changes go live, we're setting a 30 point gap between these two tiers. So with commons now ending at 50 uniqueness, uncommons will reappear in the pool starting at 80, helping them to feel much more valuable by comparison. Again, yeah, this is the item level changes for World of Warcraft. Yeah, I agree. This is a good system. If it is what I'm thinking of, and this is how it sounds like a good system. Alright, so we got more. This is a very big blog. In our iteration, we also realized that the value of specific effects was out of proportion with what was actually perceived as valuable. So we completely scrapped our original matrix and rebuilt the entire thing based on internal feedback. For example, we knew that some of the original effects didn't feel great when they were the only effect on an item, think spell resistance or charge bonus. Well, charge bonus is still pretty decent. So we've used the expanded budget and revised scoring matrix that we now have to make sure that these effects never stand alone, unless they're being given in excessive amounts. Of course, there are certain items that were considered iconic, partially due to having very powerful effects that were brought too low by the balance adjustments. Since that initial version we playtested, we've revised that to ensure that our new systems apply a status quo ethos to the changes that we've made. Previously, if an item was powerful for its tier, we'd have brought it down to an appropriate power level. But on review, we've taken a hard stance on pushing the item up instead, helping keep the core of what made certain items special firmly intact. This is a lot of writing at a very late time because they gave me the blog super late, and yeah. But I like what's being said. If I sound a little bit like tired, it's because I'm tired. It's not because I'm not interested. Let's continue. So if an item was a common with a power level of a rare, we've made it a rare. If the item was instead finding itself in a no man's land, caught somewhere between categories, too strong for an uncommon, too weak for a rare, we've again pushed that item up, adding more stats in order to help it sit right with its new tier. But what if an item was rare previously but felt quite weak, and truthfully was more like a common? There are some items that we looked at and opted to make it common, and some items that we opted to keep as rare but gave it a rare's budget worth of stats. This one's a little more vibe driven. Some items scream powerful by name and description, and so those ones were likely to have been pushed up. It's a pretty loose rule of thumb on these niche cases, but in general, if you liked an item, it will be at worst be rare, but it will never be weaker. Okay, yep, fair play. I mean, at the end of the day, there's examples down there, which unfortunately we can't really look at too well. The image that CA provided is pretty potato quality for us. It's probably looking better on the blog now, but just generally looks like there's more stats because it looks like before and afters from what I can see. But yeah, let's continue. Some items have been completely reworked if we felt they didn't have legs in their current form, but this didn't affect many of the stronger items you've come to know and love. Okay, yeah, I mean, it's something there. I can't see what the names are of these items, but we can see that one had like melee attack and bonus versus infantry, and now also has vigor reduction and flaming attacks, which is great. Yeah, had to get kind of close for that one. And some commons have been turned into rare, it seems. Interesting. Very, very interesting. On the item availability side of things, the first topic we want to address is item spam. In any given standard campaign, we generally find that a player will wind up with tens of unused items, sometimes hundreds, it depends. Going into the hundreds, there you go, in the much longer campaigns. Yeah, I play like 400-turn campaigns. This extreme amount of items can cause knock-ons to other systems, especially the UI. We found that equipping items can become much more difficult and tedious, given that you find yourself having to search through too many items in order to find the ones that you may actually want to use. This means extra scrolling and hovering over tooltips in a UI that's not really designed to feature such a breadth of items. In areas such as item fusing, a large amount of items also degrades usability of this feature. given that you'll require 2 items per fusing, creating a lot of clicking just to rid yourself of some unwanted items. Okay, so it looks like they might jump in to fix that. It's just there's very limited screen space here, so yeah. Alright, let's continue. So what have we changed? In general, there's now a lower drop rate for all items, reducing the amount that you'll gain across a campaign. We're confident that this is a positive change given the huge amounts of items that you can currently acquire. The drop rates are now a much more sensible level, which when paired with our approach to make items generally more powerful, getting less items is the best balancing consideration we could look to make. I wonder how that's going to work with other factions though, because you can steal items, so that's maybe noticeable? I mean, we're going to have to wait and see. It's worth noting that all the item drop chances effects remain unchanged across the game. So if you like, you can still build your faction around becoming an item dropping machine if that's your style and if your faction choice makes that possible. Okay, fair play. There's loads of skills which can improve that. We've also moved to ensure that there are smarter and more player-centric item drops. This is a fancy way of saying that the items you receive in your campaign are now pseudo-random instead of true random. It's no secret that almost all games slightly modify outcomes to provide the best possible gameplay experience. We're entering "this is how the sausage gets made" territory here, so if you rather preserve the magic of game development, maybe scroll on a few lines. No, this is good. Okay, let's go into it. Until now, the item drops have always been completely true random. Going forward, however, the game will now understand which items have already dropped in your campaign, what items you are and aren't using. Oh! And offering up some items that we can see you don't have already, instead of giving you more items that are similar to the ones we can see just sat around unused in your item pool. This is going to be very interesting for me because I barely use items unless I see something pop up really interesting, so I'm just going to get loads of items popping in, it seems. We ultimately want to provide you with the ability to build whatever playstyle you like from across the entire range of items in the pool, and to prevent you from getting your 50th drop on an item that you don't really like and never wanted in the first place. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. There's a lot of like recruitment cost reduction ones. I just never want those. It's worth noting that before I move on to talk about item fusing, that even with the above changes, that the system won't ever hinder you. Meaning that if you really want a particular item equipped on all of your characters, then providing that you are actually using those items, that there is no limit, okay, nor any effect on drop rate for those of the same items, really, this change will only ever affect the unused items, in essence shifting your drops in the direction of more varied items until it eventually finds the ones that you start to use of more. I like this. Personal loot, essentially. It's essentially a personal loot system. Yeah, that sounds cool. Okay, now let's jump into the other stuff, right? With item fusing, one of the core issues has always been that the sheet amount of items, sheet or sheer I guess though, that you had really impacted the usability of the feature. As such, we didn't make any real changes to the item selection functionality when fusing, purely because we feel that these issues were symptoms of the problems listed previously in this blog and weren't as much core issues. Generally, we now think that you'll find that you're fusing far fewer items given the reduction in items received, and much less of this time given the increase in each of the items' potential usage. Okay, so they haven't changed anything there. Okay, that's fine. What we have done is make a couple of fundamental changes to item fusing, however. Okay, though they have done something, which are aimed at providing a bit more usability and gameplay functionality. First, a fused item will now provide an item of the same category. This means that if you really want a nice piece of armor, that you should simply fuse your existing armors. Okay, it's never really made much sense to turn 2 necklaces into a piece of armor. and equally so if you wanted to get a specific type of item. This system we had wasn't really providing a reliable enough way to guarantee getting that, and there are of course some pros and cons to both implementations. However, we felt that this one is a bit better, so make sure that you let us know what you think of that change when you get your hands on it next week. I didn't even know that it had like a random chance, so you fuse 2 talismans, you can end up getting a weapon or something. That's wild. I guess it's just because this system never really spoke to me. Second, rare items can now be fused into unique items. Much like we have elsewhere in Update 6.2, you'll find that we've been adding a bunch of new unique tier, purple, items over the previous patches. And where possible, we'd like to keep doing that. Now you currently have a very low chance of gaining these unique items as post-battle loot. It says SAS though. Maybe it's sassy. But now you can also gain them by fusing rare items, blue. However, the major caveat here is there is only a small chance of success when fusing your rare items, and failure will result in producing a completely useless piece of scrap, quite literally just an item that is scrap which can only be salvaged. Good luck. Okay. RNG. Some people aren't going to be keen on that. I don't see a lot of people being too keen on that, to be honest, unless salvage has been improved. Because right now salvage just produces crap. You don't really get a lot of money from that. And in most cases, people used to just use items just for the purpose of scrapping. So we're going to have to wait and see. Before we get on to talking about some of the new items that we're bringing in 6.2, a note on removing banner restrictions. This one's a very simple change, but we think it's something that's super positive. You can now equip any number of the same auxiliaries to characters, providing that they themselves provide a banner. This means that if you've got a favorite banner, well, now you're no longer limited to one per army, allowing you to customize your forces a bit more neatly and evenly if you wish. There's a very good balancing consideration as to why limits exist for other followers, given the possibility of stacking effects, so we won't be making that change. However, banners, that balancing implications are far less. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Personally, I'm not too keen on that, but that's mostly because tabletop brain. It just makes me think about like a whole army of high elves with Banner of the Wall Dragon. But yeah, that's not a problem here, so it shouldn't really be too much of an issue. Okay, new unique items. So there's a bunch of new unique items coming in. Unique items are always fun to create. These powerful and sometimes weird items add some really interesting gameplay choices, and the Warhammer lore has no shortage of such items for us to play with. In previous patches, we've been adding new unique items not linked to any specific character, and we're following the same approach once more in 6.2. We've taken the opportunity here to add some new items, with one in particular being extremely unique and very powerful indeed. Okay, so let's talk about them. The Worm Slayer sword is the first one, a sword famed for its ability to slay large foes. Wait, what? 1 second. Maybe a little bit of a reference there to Sir Cecil Gaston from the Old World, I think. Because, yeah, kill large foes and so on. But yeah, a sword famed for its ability to slay large foes. I had to find my book, by the way. Yes, I disappeared for a second so I could find my arcane journal. Any character wanting to bring down the biggest of enemies will find this sword more than capable. However, one will have to be aggressive and forgo the ability to fight masses of infantry as easily. Yeah, so just good for killing large foes. Scintillating Shield. A shield polished to extreme levels, now able to reflect almost anything. Be the one that charges the enemy or the magic themselves. Okay, yeah, so damage reflection, I guess? Accursed Armor, here we go. An extremely powerful piece of armor that offers its wearer immense defensive ability and even the ability to cheat death. However, the armor is not without its curses. Cool, so it's going to have some drawbacks, I guess. Let's continue. Briar's Heath. So this is one of the most unique pieces of armor found anywhere in the world, if one can call it armor. The mass of brambles and thorns, while not immensely useful as a means of protection, instead protects its wearer by virtue of being unrivaled in keeping them hidden from foes. Okay, so stalk armor. Why not? Lastly, before we jump into the very unique one, we have the Fell Blade. Wait a second, that's a rare item, I've seen it. We felt that this iconic weapon that brought low the Lord of Undeath himself deserved to be a bit more than a regular item. Wielding this blade makes you vulnerable to its most foul curse, sure to eventually perish, but each strike causes monstrous degenerative damage and executes the weekend. Okay, so you might take some damage when you're using the item, but you're going to be doing loads and loads of damage, which is pretty much what it does in lore. Cool. And lastly, we have the 8 Burning Books of Khorne. Legends tell of 8 Burning Books of Khorne spread across existence, with any who may one day hold all of them being able to access an immense power of destruction unlike any other. Should fate ever curse you enough that you stumble across one of the 8 volumes of this dreaded book, then a fateful choice awaits. Should you pursue all further volumes at immense risk and cost to your faction, with an aim to eventually combine them all in one complete all-powerful book, or simply play it safe and let this legend remain just that? Interesting, okay. So the first of these 4 new magical items, each consisting of 2 volumes of the 8 Burning Books, can be discovered with an extremely low chance of your campaign, and each item offers the ability to discover the subsequent volumes of the book when equipped. When all 8 volumes have been collected, they can be combined, and providing that you are not a Khorne faction, a big decision awaits you that will have the ability to decide what exactly to do next. Be aware, however, that each volume will take a terrible toll on your faction, only growing more difficult to manage as you discover each volume. It is up to you alone to decide if the risk and cost is worth what lay at the end. Note, as a Khorne faction, you can of course still find and combine these books. However, certain gameplay elements will be different, with some negatives naturally being positive given your links to Khorne. Interesting. Actually, this sounds pretty damn fun. I wonder how this is going to be. It's not going to be another Sword of Cain or a crown. Yeah, this actually sounds really fun. I like an RPG aspect here. And we're near the end now. We do have 2 new units coming in. The Hobgoblin Bolt Thrower and also the... oh god, the funny unit cards back. The Blood Knights with Sword and Shield. I don't know if this is going to be the final price of the units, because like the upkeep actually looks very good for the Blood Knights, that's for sure. The Bolt Thrower, maybe not so much, but I just hope it's better than the Bolt Thrower for the Greenskins, because the Greenskin one is pretty damn garbage. We got them both here. I mean, we can only see the style for the, well, the actual unit, the actual model for the Bolt Thrower. It looks good. It looks good. It's going to be there for the Chaos Dwarfs. They're going to be basically early siege engines, and they're not bound by the usual capacity, which is quite nice. I think a lot of people are going to want that. I kind of hope that this eventually means, you know, free Hobgoblin faction would be nice. Because the Bolt Thrower, you know, that was a way back. That's a proper throwback. And then the Blood Knights with Sword and Shield, you know, just no Lancers, but they're going to be good for long campaigns. It's a shame that we can't see the model, but I guess at this point, when they do these blogs, it's usually quite early. But yeah, I mean, this is cool. 2 nice new units. The vampires are going to get something, which I think a lot of people have been hoping for Vampire Counts. This is the second time, actually, they've gotten a free unit. Nice. Well, good on them. And it's nice that the Chaos Dwarfs got something, because I know some people still want some more stuff for the Chaos Dwarfs. But yeah, overall, I think this is pretty good. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Start a bit of a discussion. This is going to come out quite early in the day, because for some reason the embargo is super early. I'm not sure why. It's just never really ideal. Let's just put it that way. Because it's super late right now, and I've been busy working on some other stuff. It's definitely one of those feelings where I feel like I'm being like pulled on different ends. But hey, it's going to be worth it in the future, believe me. Just like believe me. I'll see you all again very soon, guys. Have a great day, and yeah, bye.